welcome to the UC Big News Show. I'm thrilled to be joined by a fantastic panel this month of Craig, Blair, and Zeus. Welcome, everyone. Since our last episode, we've seen some significant developments in the UC and collaboration space, including impressive earnings reports from Microsoft, Zoom, and Cisco, underlined by major AI advances, a perhaps concerning MIT study on GenAI pilots, an expanded partnership between NICE and RingCentral, and we will also feature later on a massive preview of upcoming autumn events. Let's dive in. Now, Microsoft, Zoom, and Cisco, big names, big numbers, and yes, lots of AI hype. That is finally delivering. Microsoft Flex with revenue soaring past $76 billion, with Azure leading the charge. Zoom isn't messing around either, with solid growth and its AI companion moving from helpful sidekick to full-on teammate, and Cisco is quietly steady, building AI infrastructure without the fireworks. The takeaway, of course, is that AI is the future and everybody is grabbing a slice of the pie. But how much of that is relevant to Microsoft and Cisco's UC business? What are your thoughts on the AI underpinning all these earnings calls and its relevance to the UC arms of these tech giants?
Yeah, I think Kieran, it's an interesting question because I think for Microsoft and Cisco, so much of their AI revenue got driven from with Microsoft with Azure and with Cisco on their network side. Uh, Zoom's AI revenue with AI Companion, I think, is real. I think they're the only kind of UC vendor that's shown that, and it does to me raise a bigger question, right? If AI is the rising tide that's going to lift all boats, then when and how will that manifest itself in the UC space? We've clearly seen the value in the contact center space. I think if you look at the Figma IPO and Canva's valuation, there is proof there that if you can redefine the way people work significantly, there is economic value there. I mean, Figma's IPO is fantastic and Canva's valuations off the charts. I think maybe where our industry hasn't really done a great job, it's helping people rethink how you work. I do think Zoom is the one vendor, though, that is thinking about that. In fact, when they launched an email and application platform, people thought they were crazy. But when you talk to them, the value in doing that isn't really yet another email platform, yet another document platform. It's being able to apply AI across all things work. But they're the only vendor that's kind of gone out and done that. And so I do think there's the opportunity for the way we think about unified communications to be redefined. I just think other than Zoom, nobody's really done that yet.
I wonder about one thing. I agree with you on that. Absolutely. There's the opportunity for someone like Microsoft to do that. Their new email client, which was codenamed Monarch, when it was earlier being pitched, had the idea that it could be this idea of helping to redefine work in combination with Places being its on-site companion, Monarch being the one place you would do work and pull things in. But it hasn't crossed over into what I think is workflows or redefining workflows that you and I might do on a daily basis. With Zoom, I could stay in that same application. I can finish up a meeting, immediately dump it into a document. I can then ask it to reference an email with the person. So it does do a good job of redefining that workflow within a train of thought. I agree with you. There's no one else is getting there as of yet. And Microsoft has the potential. They talked about it at one earlier point in time. They haven't. WebEx is not there because they don't have the productivity side, in my opinion. They're leaning more into the enterprise value of combining UC with a lot of other networking things. So you're right. It's an area that's ripe for someone to disrupt even further.
I think Microsoft had an early advantage, but then kind of blew it. They came out with all these different co-pilots and all these different, AI assistants that it just got so confusing. If they stuck to that one strategy and had, the one co-pilot for all or whatever, I think they could have really made a difference. But their message just got so confusing. Pricing got, I don't think anyone understands the pricing. So I think that they really could have been the leader here, and they probably still will be, but I think they just made some missteps along the way that kind of set them back. And Zoom, who, no one thinks about for email or product, that kind of thing. And here they are leapfrogging. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, the one vendor we haven't mentioned, of course, is Google, and this would have been their opportunity to actually take their suite and do something different with it. But of course, Google can never really get out of their own way. I would have liked to have seen something different from them. I also think, Craig, and Blair, when you brought up Microsoft, the problem that Microsoft has too is all the products are built in silos. And so you can't really get, data in SharePoint is different than data in Teams, which is different than data in Office. And uh, it just makes it very difficult to apply AI across that.
And that's the advantage Zoom has. Zoom has that one, single platform story.
I don't think Zoom's done a great job of explaining that, though. That's the only downside to it. When they even when they first rolled out email, and of course we all have access to Zoom accounts. I didn't really. I remember loading it up and thinking, it's kind of a crappy email client. But then I remember doing a search, right? And then because I thought one of the Zoom people sent me something in chat, but they actually sent it in mail, and I was able to search across the two. And that's the first time ever I'd ever been able to search across chat and mail. And I think I would like to see Zoom be a little more, um, I guess just bolder on kind of the disruptive effect they can have by having all this into one platform. But I do think the productivity side is an important part of that. And it would be nice to see somebody else, maybe it is Google or something, try and really, really attack Microsoft there. In fact, I think one of the things that XD said that was really interesting at the analyst summit was he thought the businesses out there that would be most impacted by AI were Google Search or Microsoft Office. And so I think they're, obviously Zoom's not really going to touch the search piece, but we've already seen Google Search lay people off, right, which they've never done before. And the Office side of it is what Zoom's trying to upset. And perhaps down the road, you'll see a Figma or a Canva add in the communication side. They already have the productivity side and kind of backdoor their way into it. Who knows?
Yeah, how many years have we been talking about Google, finally getting its act together, on, and it's, I mean, on the AI side, they are, heads above, so many others, but on the productivity side, we've been saying for years and years, this is the year for Google, and it hasn't happened.
Yeah, I think every year for a while, my prediction was going to be this would be the next year would be, yeah, and it would come and go, and then we'd see nothing.
The problem is because the business can never meet their threshold that they consider to be a head-on viable business. Hey, let me throw a curveball then at you, talking about this. What about someone like RingCentral that's actually coming at this from a voice-first point of view? I think they actually have a really interesting angle that they might be able to do something. Now, they're not into productivity, but they are hinting and leaning a lot into we can harvest a lot of data from those voice calls and potentially pull that into probably more of an SMB like workflow that's a little bit more phone first business. Do they have a potential to disrupt there?
Yeah, I think they do. In fact, if you believe, in fact, Roland used to talk about this all the time about voice being the kind of dark data that we've never taken advantage of, right? If you believe that, which I don't think anybody would disagree with that, Ring's got probably one of the biggest and most mature voice networks out there. In fact, they do a lot of the voice for Microsoft Teams, right? And so if they could figure out a way to harness that, I mean, there's probably something there. I mean, they've got a bigger install base in voice than almost anybody. So it's not voice has never been the sexiest thing, but I do think we're seeing a voice rebirth, right? I think people are tending to use voice more because of agentic AI. And no, you could argue nobody does voice better than RingCentral.
Yeah, voice AI is becoming huge, and then there's VCon, which I don't understand all of it, but really trying to understand what's going on in voice and getting all the data from it. So, yeah, voice is definitely making a rebirth, and so yeah, I think the voice companies are in a year or two are going to be able to say, "See, I told you so."
And then there's one other angle. Kieran, I'm taking over your job. I'm going to ask all the questions. Okay. There is the idea then to, like you said, redefining work and how we're doing things is a very highly verticalized, focused approach to that can come along as well. So what I like is that Zoom is actually showing a lot of investment in that area as well too, which is fantastic. But there's some underdogs also too, like GoTo. Do you know they have the largest install base of auto dealerships? And if in somewhere in a world that there's an LLM specific to an auto dealership, like bluebook.com or something like that coming along, there's a lot of interesting verticalized data sets that people can use. They could use a RAG model against it or something like that. That might make it really interesting. So it wouldn't be productivity redefining, but it could still be work redefining for some verticalized businesses.
Yeah, in fact, and I didn't think Arvind Krishna, and it wouldn't be an LLM, right? Otto talked about the future of AI being small language models, which because the LLMs are these trillion parameter models, and maybe you only need a 2 million parameter model, small language model for auto dealerships, and maybe GoTo is the company to do that. And so and I do think vertical is interesting. In fact, if you look, Zoom launched their Work Vivo for frontline workers, right? I think, I've talked to Randy Maestre there, and they're big into verticals, into industry use cases. And when you think of frontline workers, and certainly auto dealership falls in that, there are 10 times as many frontline workers as there are knowledge workers. And maybe our UC industry has thought about this problem wrong. Instead of targeting everything at the knowledge worker, go after the 10x frontline worker, and have AI be able to help those workers be more efficient, because that's long been ignored.
Which is really insightful, because a couple things to tie back to what Blair said is you're dealing with people that aren't sitting there at a keyboard and mouse to interact with their work through their fingertips. They're going to be talking about it through their voice, right? Hey, I need to have a price check on this. Hey, I've got a patient coming in over here. And so their opportunity to redefine how they work might take place in that frontline workflow.
Yeah, I've been talking with Wildix recently, and they're doing some great stuff with frontline workers and with sales workers and with headsets and people in stores. So we talk about frontline workers. I mean, they're actually doing things with people, in actual stores with, headsets and being able to, identify theft potential and, things like that. So I think we are going to see a lot of vertical use cases. So Wildix right now focuses on sales. But I think companies that do that really can get an advantage because, and this kind of goes into the next thing we're going to be talking about, but the whole idea of AI and productivity, how do you really prove that productivity? I think if you do find those specific verticals and use cases, you can define it easier than, just a knowledge worker who can, get a meeting summary or something.
Yeah. So I think, Kieran, your answer is yes, there's potential to create a rising tide there. I think other than Zoom, nobody's really thought about it yet, though. And so that's perhaps where this industry needs to start focusing.
Well, terrific. Thank you, all three of you. I've got Craig, who's raising further points of information, and Blair is doing organic segues into the next topic. I will just retire myself from the exchange.
You're going to be replaced by AI yourself. What are you talking about?
Well, nobody expected that to be. People were more thinking it was news articles. It was actually panel hosts there all the time. And as Blair so elegantly teased, yeah, we're moving from the vendors to the end user aspect, because there was a recent MIT study titled "The GenAI Divide: State of AI in Business in 2025." A very catchy title, I'm sure you agree, which found that 95% of GenAI pilots flop. Poor workflow integration, fuzzy objectives, and misalignment with business needs are cited as the usual suspect. Now, Blair, what's our takeaway from this report? Is it a reality check and a worrying sign that the AI boom might be a bubble, or is it an illustration that companies need to collaborate with specialist vendors to really maximize their ROI when it comes to AI?
I think the latter. I think part of the problem is, and we've been saying this for a while. Sometimes companies just throw out AI because their CEO or whatever says we have to do AI, so they just kind of throw something out there. It's not. They don't really know what they're doing. It's not necessarily attached to a workflow or to any specific goal, and so it fails. But I think we've seen certainly like in the contact center, when you use AI for a special purpose, for the right use case, and for something specific, then you can really get the value and the ROI and all the benefits. It's just if you throw it out there haphazardly without really having a goal and knowing what outcomes you're trying to attain, that's when you're going to fail. But if you do something very specific, maybe AI for financial services, for identifying compliance and things like that, and there are several companies that do that, Global Relay and some others. That's where you can really get the benefit. But just throwing it out there isn't going to work. And what the study did find is that 67% do succeed when they buy from specialized vendors and build partnerships, and only 33% succeed when they try to build it themselves. And I don't know who all these people are who are trying to build it themselves. That part I didn't really get. But again, I think the idea is if you're working with the right vendor for the right use case, and doing something specialized, not just general, throwing AI out there for the sake of it, that's when you're really going to get the benefit. And again, contact centers, I think, have really been the case for this, because they've really been seeing success. So I think the idea is, know what you're trying to do, what your outcomes are, attach it to, specific workflows, work with the right vendors, and then you can succeed.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to build it yourself, right? Because we've seen even some systems integrators try and build like this Uber, um, generative AI agent to sit on top of that. Not really had a lot of success with it. Although I do think the study, um, it, the, I'm not sure what people are supposed to do with that. I think a lot of it, sure, there's a lot of failures, but when I was talking to Kieran and kind of pre-recording, I was saying if you go back in time, like pre-internet, there was probably a study done that said 95% of internet projects failed, right? So, the trend is here, it's happening, it's going to redefine how we work. The question is, how do you implement it? I do know a lot of companies trying to build their own, and I think in fact, uh, I remember talking to Dell about this like a couple of years ago. They were trying to build their own contact center, right? With that had AI built into it. And I'm like, why? Right? Like, there's so many pre-built tools out there, and but they just thought that was their time to, you know, create some sort of competitive advantage. And I think when we're in these ships, yeah, well, AWS has a much better contact center than Dell, so I do think that companies do get themselves out over their skis, and they try and run these pilot projects where they build their own, and then they kind of wind up going back to the drawing boards. I blame a lot of the big consultancies on this. The Accentures of the world that probably come in and go, "We can build one for you," and then those projects flop. But there's no doubt that this trend's going to happen, right? We're going to be using agentic for everything, and this, companies may be failing now, but ultimately they'll retool and try it again to figure out a better path forward.
So I forgot to mention the thing that I think is most important is these companies probably they didn't spend any time on user adoption and training. And that's another thing, I've been talking about forever and ever. But if you just throw these tools out and don't really explain to your workers, what they're for, how to use them, the hows and the whys, then you're not going to get the success. But so the companies that spend time, on adoption, on training, on helping workers understand, here are the tools, here's how it's going to help you, here's how you should use it, here's how you should not use it, here's what to do, here's what not to do. That's when you're going to get success. But again, if you just throw the tools out there and say, okay, go for it, you're less likely to really achieve the outcomes that you're trying to get.
I agree with you, Blair. I have a phrase I've been using with this. The people that are being successful are the ones that are bringing in what I call Monday morning AI. It's boring AI use cases. It's use cases that do have something that's measurable, but it's not a moonshot use case. And I feel like the MIT story, when I read it, was about all these moonshots. And you hit one of the great key things, which is end user adoption and readiness. Another thing on that is organizational readiness. Is my data ready? Is it cleansed? Is it organized? Is it the right data sets that I'm pulling in? And then other governance. Do I give people access to what they're supposed to do as well too? And I think one of our near and dear industries, the CX industry, the contact center industry, was already organized. Data was organized. They had a target audience of agents, not agentic agents, but agents they wanted to improve experience with. They had customer satisfaction measurements already in place too. So it was kind of a boring use case in a lot of ways. It was Monday morning, what can AI improve? And it worked well. Otherwise, it's like Zia said, it's like pets.com, that came along and everyone said, it's going to fail. You cannot ship dog food, but I just bought from Chewy.com just last week. So it's working eventually. So we'll see.
The other thing the contact center industry had, Craig, is though they measure everything like 3 days from Sunday, right? And so they understand the metrics they're dealing with. And I think a lot of times, if you were to throw Copilot, your average knowledge worker, I don't know how you measure the benefits of that.
Exactly. And that was that's part of that waterfall of decision process. CEO says we need an AI strategy. CFO says it better be measured and I can get some value on it. At CIO, CTO is going to try and find something that works. And if there's not measurable results, it goes back up the chain as a failure in that process.
And also, if the workers don't understand what's in it for them, why should I use these tools? How is it going to help me? Or is it going to take my job? Am I just, training something that's going to take my job? So that's why, again, I keep going back to this, user adoption and having the right strategy and really helping your workers understand how to use it and why to use it. Because without that, you're just going to get, resistance, and people just aren't going to use the tools, and you're not going to get the ROI, and it's going to be a wasted investment.
Absolutely. I think with AI, more than any other technology, the carrot is much more frugal than the stick when it comes to user adoption. And moving on to our next topic, Zeus mentioned RingCentral earlier, and they have announced an expanded partnership with NICE, who they've been working with roughly about 10 years now, with a tightly integrated UCaaS and CCaaS offering. The renewed deal doubles down on AI-driven customer and employee experiences, boosts joint go-to-market strategy, and amps up partner support. Zeus, what can you tell us about this one? What is your theory on how this expanded partnership will work?
Yeah, well, they've been partners for a long time. And I know good ones too. I think although NICE doesn't report anymore how many seats they've sold Ring doesn't report anymore how many seats of NICE they sold. The last time they did say it was about 300 million in ARR, which was a few years ago, which is over 10% of NICE's revenue. So they're a big, important partner from them. Now, of course, a couple of years ago, Ring rolled out Ring CX, their own contact center, which I think was interpreted as a hostile move by NICE, which I might have interpreted that way as well as I were NICE. And then NICE, of course, rolled out their own UC. And I think there was a lot of customers out there that were worried that this deal wasn't going to get renewed and then they'd have to figure out what to do. But cooler heads prevailed. They re-upped. And I think through that process, NICE and Ring actually better understand their swim lanes. If your Ring sells a lot of Ring CX down market, right? Auto dealerships and small hospitals, school systems, things like that. In fact, I talked to a school system that uses Ring CS just to do outbound notification to parents of school pickups that are late and things like that. You're never, ever going to bring NICE in for that, right? They're way too big, way too complicated, and way too expensive. But upmarket, that's where the partnership has worked, and the two companies have done a good job. So I think for Ring, what this does is it allows them to sell their bundled UCaaS, CCaaS offering down market, and then up market where you've got more complicated needs. That's where they bring NICE in. And I think it's good for everybody, most importantly, the customers that use both. I do know there was a lot of competitors hoping the deal wouldn't get done so they could swoop in and maybe take some of those deals. But I do think that to me, partnerships work when there's mutual value exchange, and this one has worked, and I was glad to see, the partnership continue. And I do think it becomes important too with Cognigy, right? That wasn't really brought up, but Cognigy is RingCentral's AI built into their product. If the deal with NICE had fallen apart, who knows what happens to the Cognigy partnership that Ring currently has. And so this makes sure that all stays together too. And so there's a lot of good value in that for everybody.
I think a lot of us read into things that maybe weren't there a couple of years ago, because Ring always made it clear that, NICE is their partner for, complex contact center types of things, and that Ring CX has specific use cases, and it's not trying to be all things to everybody. They kept saying, they didn't say, I forget the terminology, but it was, for not so complex types of situations. So I don't think their messaging never said, we're going to use Ring CX for everything. They were very clear about, the swim lanes, but I think some of us kind of said, oh, they're doing their own thing. And then, as Zia said, NICE came out with their partnership with 3CX. So everyone thought, oh, it's not RingCentral. So, the partnership's over. But I think all along Ring was pretty clear, that we're still partners. We're still, NICE is very important to us for the high end, and we're not going there. So I think that I think some of us read things into it that maybe we're not there, but it could also be with Scott Russell coming in to NICE. He was like, okay, we're going to take care of this partnership because, Scott has been really, really great on partnerships and the whole NICE ecosystem. So I think, that might have had something to do with it. We don't know all the behind the scenes, but NICE is definitely committed to partnerships these days. And I think I wrote on LinkedIn in the last NICE financial analyst call, I never heard the word partnership and ecosystem as much in like years that I heard in one call. So this is definitely an important direction for NICE.
Yeah, no, your point's valid, Blair. In fact, at the analyst summit, which was back in February, I asked Vlad about the partnership. I said, some of your partners out there are getting a little nervous as to whether they should go renew the NICE contracts. And he said, tell them to stop worrying. We're going to get the deal done. Tell them to go renew them. Right. But I do think that, competitive chatter, Sam Wilson,
and analyst chatter.
yeah, was indicating that maybe the deal wouldn't get done, but Vlad has been very clear that his intention was to get it done all along. So,
what's also interesting is you don't get as much questions about NICE's UC platform, 1CX, in that reverse conversation as well too. About
do they sell it? Do you know anybody running it?
They did have a booth. Yeah, they did have a booth at NICE Interactions. It was very small, and you had to know where it was. But they did have one little booth, and I remember a customer came up and was like, what is this? And the guy explained. He said, "Oh, I didn't know you had this." It's like, well, there's the problem.
Right, exactly. But I mean, so does RingCentral serve that purpose for NICE in reverse? Is the question that it might bring up? Does it create a UC platform that still helps to insulate and protect the NICE core business of contact center?
I don't think NICE really cares about that market. I think it's a defensive offering. Down market, if somebody wants a cheap UC solution, they'll sell them that. But I think in NICE's install base, UC and CC are largely separate, right? So it's NICE isn't selling to those school systems and things like that that might want the combined offerings of, or the auto dealership that you brought up before.
Terrific. Well, before we leave, September is looking packed with events as the autumn events calendar heats up. Craig, what are you particularly looking forward to, and are there any particular trends or topics at these events you're excited about seeing?
Well, there's a lot of stuff. So all these UC platforms we talked about, there's some major events coming up. So Zoomtopia is taking place. Now, this is 100% virtual this time. They have no customers on site or analysts or what have you. But there's going to be a lot of online chatter about that as well, too. As well in the UC space, a few weeks later is going to be WebEx1, which is going to be taking place in the San Diego area. Again, they're having an analyst track as well as bringing in all the customers. So that's going to be an in-person event as well. And not to leave it out, but in November, Microsoft has Ignite, which is across the Microsoft ecosystem. And UC and Teams winds up being about one track that's about 4 sessions. But there's a lot of opportunity for people to talk about what they're doing in the space. Just going back to what Zeus was saying in the beginning, is this an opportunity, a window to capture some of that AI mindshare and branding taking place in that? Well, what I expect to see is this. I expect to see Zoom to continue with its track that it's done. From what it shared with us in July as their strategy around a lot of key areas around redefining work. Zeus and I did a video about that at the point in time and talked about that, to what their earning results just were. I think you're going to continue to see them doing that. I expect them to do a lot more in terms of the verticalized solutions, and I expect to see a lot more about WorkVivo and their frontline solution as well too. And then on the WebEx front, though, these guys are really leaning into what they call the CX-EX balance, specifically to what's taking place. And I think you're going to start continuing to see some of that crossover, i.e. the RingCentral NICE idea where the synergies are between those two platforms taking place. So I think there's gonna be a lot of good opportunity coming out, and chest pumping up, and I've got AI, I got AI. I don't know. What do the other panelists think?
Hey, what do you think of the virtual only format of Zoomtopia? You think it's a mistake?
Well, Yes and no. They are falling into a trap that another generalized industry event has, which has just gone from Florida over to Las Vegas. I think being located in San Jose for so long, they've tapped into all their customer base on that West Coast that would come to this event. It's a midweek event. They've tapped into that. So I think geographically they've kind of limited the number of customers coming in. And what took place the last time it was in person or they had in-person stuff, there was a lot of partners there, boom, 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 showing their stuff, but there wasn't a lot of customer driving the interactions. And so those customer centric interactions got small, which is unfortunate because Zoom had such passionate customers, especially coming out of the pandemic. I mean, it was grassroots driving it all. So I think it's not a mistake by fact that they're still having it in San Jose. If they want to reinvent this as a customer event, I think they need to move it around and take it to where customers may be to bring it in.
Yeah, that's a good point. I just look at data points around these virtual events, and you typically get a pretty high engagement rate for the CEO keynote, maybe the CTO one, and then after that it drops way off, and they try and drip content. Like Google does this, and they drip content out over 9 weeks and stuff, and after maybe the first 4 days, you're bored of it, and you move on to the next thing, and so. I am expecting to continue the themes that you mentioned, but I wonder if it's if the bubble that we lived in where all the events were virtual, people just got burned out from that, and now we want in person again. So
I think our attention spans when it's virtual are much, much lower. We get distracted. We do other things. When we're at a conference, when we're, in a room, we're paying attention, for the most part. And I think when we're in our office or at home doing it virtually, it's like, oh, I need to go do this. I need to go do that. Oh, I just got an email. It's very, very different.
yeah, some of us might look at their bike and go, I could go out for a ride or listen to this session.
Rick, we'll go in San Diego. Let's do that because here we have a case study. We can look at WebEx. And then what WebEx does, I think, at their event, which I really appreciate, is they have a great expo area so customers can come and learn all about the solutions. But they do a lot of on-site training as well too. There's a lot of hands-on workshops and things like that to help really drive the solution. So I think WebEx is going to be a good counterpoint to Zoom's virtual, and just a few weeks apart, we get to see what that difference is. I do expect to see a lot of vibrancy at WebEx One. I do expect to see a lot of energy and excitement, especially with Cisco coming off good quarter. And like you said, I think we're going to really be seeing how they want to try and grab some of that AI mindshare with what's taking place in market.
Terrific. Well, I'm looking forward to everyone feeding back their views on it, virtual versus in person. A showdown for the ages. From the UK side of things, I'll be attending CASA 25 in Amsterdam, not technically the UK, but I will be flying from there for the CPAS event. And there'll be all three members of UC Today will be at the UC Expo in London at the beginning of November. So if the three times the charm, if anyone wants to reach out and have a word, we'll be open to chatting about all things UC in collaboration as well. I think that's all for today. So I want to say a massive thank you to Craig, Zeus, and Blair for being here. And naturally, best of luck for the event season coming up.
And for everyone, we're not going to replace Kieran with AI. He actually does perform a very helpful role here and keep us on track. So we'll keep him dutifully employed there.
If I can get that in writing, Craig, I feel a lot more comfortable. Thank you, and please give us a like and share on social media and LinkedIn. And if you have your own insights and perspectives, please comment and let us know. And if you do see myself or any of our lovely colleagues here on the show at the events, please come over and say hello. I've been Kieran Devlin of UC Today. Thanks for watching.